Hello, welcome back. Today's question is, how does a birth doula fit into the care team during a birth?
This is Kaylee Daly, the bi-weekly podcast about all things doula tips and tips, where we answer one question about pregnancy, labor, postpartum, or lactation in order to have your journey in this parenting world be just a little bit more informed and filled with consent.
Hello and welcome back. My name is Kaylee Harad. Today I am answering a question about what a birth doula's role is on the birth team. Now, this of course looks a little bit different for each birth, for each type of birth, etc. But I'm going to kind of parse that out a little bit as we go. So first off, I am Kaylee Harad, the host of this beautiful podcast. I'm a childbirth educator. I am actually an author of the Birth Prep Blueprint and Postpartum Prep Blueprint, two of my classes that I created. And also, I am a doula. I'm a postpartum and birth doula and a mom and a podcaster, obviously. And I also help run a parenting community. And then I'm starting doula mentoring in the new year. So I am very excited. You're going to hear about the doula mentoring soon in a couple episodes. I'm super excited to finish up this series on doula hiring, etc. And then move on to some postpartum stuff. So oftentimes when I tell someone I'm a doula, they ask if I catch babies, right? Do I catch babies? Am I a midwife, basically? And I say no. And people will say, okay, if I have a midwife, do I need a doula, right? And again, I'm like, we're not the same. So I want to kind of paint a picture for you in a variety of scenarios. First scenario is a hospital birth. So in a hospital birth scenario, there's two different parts of the time when you don't have a lot of support from your care provider and the nurses. So the first is obviously when you're at home. Now, my experience with my clients, with myself, is that you go into labor, you call your provider, hey, I think I'm in labor. And they're like, awesome. Call me back when you're in more labor. Or they say like, call me back when you're this far along. Or come into the hospital when your contractions are this far apart. And so most of the time, your provider is not going to say to you, at least a hospital provider is typically not going to say to you, okay, I want you to go like take a nap and then take a bath and then eat a meal and then watch a movie that you love. Like they're not going to give you steps to do until then. They're just going to be like, come in when your contractions are 4 minutes apart, right? And so a doula kind of fills that gap. The gap of like, okay, am I actually in labor? How do I figure that out? That's the first bit. And then once I realize I am in fact in labor, what the heck do I do until I get to the hospital if I'm birthing at the hospital, right? Like what should that time at home look like? So that's part of it, right? Then you get to the hospital and you get admitted. During the admission time, like the evaluation, the triage area is what that's called. And kind of the time of being admitted into the hospital. That time, you actually have a lot of attention because you're having a lot of things done during that time. You're having your cervix checked. You're oftentimes answering a bunch of questions about who you are and all of your health history and every little bit of data that you've ever had about your life. They're doing some blood work. The nurses are putting in an IV. They're monitoring the baby. You're like having a chat with your provider about whether or not you should stay, etc. Right? So that short initial time at the hospital tends to have more people in it than once you actually get transferred to your labor and delivery room. Now, when you're in your labor and delivery room, you oftentimes don't see your provider beyond just cervical exams, when a decision needs to be made, and when they're catching the baby. I don't say that to fault them. In a hospital setting, those providers are managing a lot of different deliveries and a lot of different scenarios and even sometimes emergencies, right? So it's not to say that that's bad. It's to say that they are not going to be able to spend much time with you in most scenarios, okay? Then the same is honestly true for the nurses, because the nurses usually have at least 2 or 3 patients, depending on the hospital, depending on where you live and how many people, what the population is like, right? How many hospital settings there are. And so that very much dictates how much time your nurse can spend with you. Obviously, I know nurses that would love to spend a lot of time with you like they were a doula, but oftentimes they're also helping to manage other people's labor. So like, if room 2 is currently having a baby, there needs to be an extra nurse in there. If someone's in a C-section, that requires some extra nurses. So there's a lot of different scenarios that are happening on the floor at any given time that necessitate that your nurse does not just stay in the room with you, helping you kind of contraction by contraction. Okay. And that's not only if you're unmedicated. Also, if you're medicated, then like you need to still change positions so that your epidural stays evenly distributed and things like that. Some nurses are really great about doing that. And other nurses have a really busy floor and don't do that as much, right? And so you can spend hours of time alone in a hospital setting, or sometimes you see your nurse like once or twice an hour. They just kind of come in, check on you, see if everything's okay, and then leave again, right? Now, you always have the ability to call someone in. So I do not mean that you're going to get to the hospital and then just be like forgotten about and neglected. That's not what I mean. What I mean is don't expect to have moment by moment assistance from either your nurse team or your doctor team or your midwife team at a hospital in most cases. Okay. So the doula kind of fills that space as well, because we not only provide another set of eyes and ears that's in the room with you to see if what you're doing and having experienced, etc., is normal or not, but also we provide some comfort in the midst of that, the ability to change your positions, etc. Now, that means in many ways we make a nurse's job easier usually, right? Because they don't have to worry about, do you have water? Because they know your doula can get you water and they know where the water is in the hospital, right? And so there's a little bit of space for your nurse team to also be able to focus on their nurse portion of their job and not as much on like getting you water and snacks and things like that, because they know that the doula can do that and that's not a medical part of the job, right? So that's kind of one scenario. Another scenario is you're going to a birth center. Now, there's 2 things that are different about that. One is usually you wait a lot longer to go into a birth center than you would to go into a hospital. So you have a lot more time at home laboring in most scenarios. So that means your doula can provide that at-home support. I don't think if you're giving birth at a birth center, you should have a doula that does not want to come to your house, because that's a very important part of that time when you're giving birth in a birth center, to help a baby be born and to help you cope with labor well before you ever get to the birth center. Okay. Now, once you're at the birth center, you do typically get a little bit more attention, in part because a birth center tends to have fewer people giving birth at a time, right? So many birth centers have like between 2 and 5 or 6 rooms. So there is not the ability to have like literally 10 people giving birth at the same time. That means if you have a care team of a nurse and a midwife, or a nurse and 2 midwives, or 2 nurses and 2 midwives, or whatever that looks like, and they're managing 3 laborers, or they're managing 2, or just yours, you're of course getting a lot more attention from them than otherwise in a hospital, right? Just because of the volume. Now, that means if you have your nurse or your midwife or both with you more frequently, what does the doula role look like there? So in a birth center setting, my experience is that the doula role is a lot more comfort measures, because you're always going to be without an epidural in a birth center, right? Because birth centers don't have epidurals. And so there's a part of physically supporting a birth that involves a rhythm of comfort. And oftentimes, as you progress through labor, the amount of physical support you need from your care team is a lot. So maybe you need like hip squeezes or pressure on your back, or you need to like hold on to somebody when you're contracting, or you want to slow dance and you're kind of taking turns who you're slow dancing with. All of that is incredibly physical work for the care team. And of course, for you, for the person in labor, more than anybody else. But for the doula, for the nurse, for the midwife, also a lot of hard physical work, right? Your partner, etc. So one of the things the doula does is most of that physical work so that your care team can handle anything that comes up medically, which really gives them the space to monitor that stuff really carefully and wonderfully, because your doula is able to do your comfort measure stuff and kind of take care of that portion. Now, ideally, those roles all kind of work together in like beautiful harmony, right? That has typically been my experience. I know that is not everybody's experience. But in most cases, when you're with an out-of-hospital birth team, meaning a birth center or a home birth team, they really value a doula being present, in part because we fill a role that they do not fill, and then they don't need to do that work. And ultimately, I think their patients are more satisfied with their experience. So home birth is the last of the three that we're talking about. And it is similar to birth center, except you're calling the team to you instead of going there. So one of the things that a doula helps navigate is when to go in, if it is time or not, if that happens sooner, later, if there's something that's coming up that's concerning, right? And so with a home birth scenario, you're not going anywhere. You're calling your team to you so that they get there in plenty of time for whatever the timing is that you've kind of planned out, right? So part of the role of a doula in that scenario oftentimes is also communicating with your birth team or helping you communicate with your birth team about when and how they want to join you and what that will look like, right? And then again, kind of being like this lovely little like group of care where you're getting medical care on one side from the medical providers, and you're getting emotional and physical and educational comfort on the other side from your non-medical provider, who is your doula. So that's kind of what that looks like, at least in my experience. Now, obviously, all doulas function differently. Obviously, all birth teams function differently. It is not always a beautiful, lovely mashup of personalities and people. But that is how those roles should work together if they are working together well. Okay. So, we have, I think, one more doula episode, unless someone sends me a doula question like today. And then you're going to hear a little bit about my new doula mentoring in a bonus episode, which I'm super pumped about, because I know some of you that listen to this episode or this podcast are doulas. And so I want you to know about it and to be able to share that news. And also then we'll dive into some postpartum information. And we'll start talking with some other providers. I'm super excited to bring some new guests that you haven't heard from and some topics that we haven't talked about. So until next time, I wish you well-informed, consent-filled births.
These episodes are edited and produced by Kaylee Harrod, as I'm sure you can probably tell. And our amazing music is credited in the show notes as well. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And in the meantime, have wonderful and consent-filled births.